Wow. Those were very powerful words. Thank you very much, Karen. And as a ordained minister of the gospel, I challenge all of my colleagues to align with 1 billion rising. And as CEO of the King Center, committed to encouraging others to choose nonviolence as a lifestyle, I'm honored and humbled to rise, release, and dance with 1 billion rising for justice in 2014 and beyond. I want to give honor and praise to God for all he's done in my life and the life of each and every one of us. For through God, we know that all things are possible. And the goal of securing justice for women and girls throughout the world will be realized. I would be remiss, though, if I did not thank and pay homage to the woman who had the foresight to begin this much-needed movement for women and girls throughout the world, who is this year's King Center Coretta Scott King Angel Award recipient, Miss Eve Ensler. For without her vision and leadership, we would not be here today. And vision, as we know, is so critical because the Word of God reminds us that without a vision, the people perish. I'd also like to thank the many women who are here with us today, helping to lead Atlanta's efforts to fight for justice for women and girls. My good friend, Mrs. Laura Turner Seidel, Mrs. Jennifer Barnes, Mary Frances Bowley, Stephanie Davis, Helen Butler, Maya Penn, and so many others that you've heard from today, and all of you. Today we rise, 1 billion strong, with our sisters and those who support our sisters in the struggle for justice for women and children all over the earth. My father once said, our lives begin to end the day we remain silent about the things that matter. And I'm here to share with you today that the plight of women and girls who are victims and potential victims of violence all over the world matters, and it matters greatly. More important, however, is that justice cannot and will not ever be served for women and girls if we as a people remain silent. My mother, Coretta Scott King, reminds us that struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and you win it in every generation. With her words in mind, I say it's time for our generation to rise. The generation that has reaped the benefits of my father's legacy, my mother's legacy, Cesar Chavez's legacy, and so many other great leaders who through the years have fought and sacrificed for justice. It's time for the next generation, yes, all of you young people who are our future leaders, to rise, to not remain silent, but to join with the voices of women and girls and those who love and care about them, to rise for justice in all the places where justice is so often not served, in our legal, judicial, and governmental systems, in our corporate and business arenas, and in our churches and communities. Today, I ask you to release, yes, release the anger, the disappointment, the hatred that you may feel, and seek to move toward embracing unconditional love, which is at the very core of any nonviolent movement for social change. Release the tears that you may have held in for too long, and mourn the losses that you may have experienced, and choose nonviolence as a lifestyle. We must release by forgiving our enemies and those who may commit transgressions against us. And as a society, it's past time for us to release our voracious appetite, which allows us to accept and be comfortable with violence in our music, video games, television shows, movies, and even our daily conversations. In 1963, which happens to be the year that I was born, my father gave a speech at Western Michigan University where he talked about the idea of creative maladjustment. My father talked about how one doesn't want to necessarily be maladjusted and how we all want to have a well-adjusted life. But then he goes on to say, and I quote, "There are certain things in this nation and our world of which I'm proud to be maladjusted, and which I hope all men and women of goodwill will be maladjusted until the good society is realized." His words, as is so often the case when one is speaking of a true prophet, are as true today as they were then. For example, we must never, ever adjust to violence as a normal part of our existence as human beings. We must never, ever adjust to women and girls being treated as less than a man in terms of their wages and being provided less pay for the same position, which is economic violence. We must never adjust to women and girls being mistreated because they may wear a habib or braids in their hair, which is cultural violence. We must never adjust to women and girls being forced into a loveless marriage or raped, which is sexual violence. We must never, ever adjust to women and girls being verbally abused by their significant other or talked to in a manner which diminishes them as a human being in any form or any fashion, which is spiritual violence. We must never adjust to women being beaten, battered, trampled upon, slapped, shaken, or in any way harmed, which is physical violence. Because regardless of the form of violence, we as a society must rise and support daughters, sons, sisters, mothers, grandmothers, wives, nieces, nephews, aunts, and let them know that we support them and that we will rise and stand up for justice on their behalf and will no longer be shut up, silenced, or silent. Finally, I ask you to dance and celebrate, for all is not lost, bleak and dark. There is light and there is hope. The mere fact that we are here today, recognizing and acknowledging that there is much work to be done and committing ourselves to this effort is a reason to celebrate and dance. We must reject the status quo and create a more just, humane, and equal society for all of God's children. If my father were here with us today, I believe he would say this: our nettlesome task is to organize our strength into compelling power, so that government, and let me just add, courts, corporations, and faith-based organizations cannot elude our demands. We must ask ourselves the question, how do we organize in a way that our power cannot be ignored? Well, the answer is we need a higher level of collaborative leadership that harnesses the strength of the collective power of our individual communities. And it reminds me of Nehemiah when he was on the wall. And he told those that were gathered there, he said, "The work is extensive, and we are widely separated on the wall. But when you hear the sound of the trumpet, when you hear 1 billion rising, come to that place and our God will fight for us." Without this coordinated effort, we will succumb to the age-old trick of the enemy, which is to divide and conquer. But we say no to that. And I declare on this day, in this place, and at this moment in time, we have and we must rise as a nonviolent army committed to taking out all of the enemies of love and trust and respect and dignity and justice that have harmed our women and children far too long. We must spread our maladjustment to the masses by forming a new coalition called the International Maladjusted Coalition of 1 Billion Rising for Justice. My friends, in the spirit of Joshua and Deborah, in the spirit of Harriet and Martin, in the spirit of Coretta and Rosa, in the spirit of Malayla and Eve, we must be brave and courageous in the face of adversity. The fact that 1 billion Rising for Justice have come together on this day, February 14th, 2014, to rise, release, and dance for women and girls is the beginning of that process. We must continue our struggle for freedom and justice for all humanity, and most importantly, for those who may not always have a voice, our women, our girls, our children throughout the world who desperately need to know we hear their voices screaming in the wilderness. We must promote and pursue justice by protecting women and girls from the many forms of violence that are perpetuated against them each and every day of their lives. Let us never forget and remind others that the number 1 billion was not selected by accident. Let us remember that it has tremendous significance as it represents the number of women who will be raped or beaten in their lifetime. So today, I answer the call of 1 billion Rising for Justice. I rise, I release, I dance, and I call on each and every one of you to rise, unafraid to speak out in and to the places where justice should be served, and demand an end to all forms of violence against women and girls. I call on you to release any animosity or hatred that you may hold against those who may have harmed you in the past, and let go of the shackles that might hinder you from standing with women and girls throughout the world for justice. And I call upon you to dance in celebration of the greatest coming together of maladjusted women and those who love and support these women, who continue to be empowered by and dedicated to choosing nonviolence now as a lifestyle, because there is no other way, for now is the time.